Director of National Youth Council, Lamin Dabo. It is an honor to be here today to moderate this interesting panel, a panel where we have subject matter specialists to come and talk to us about different reforms in the country. As I rightly mentioned, I am Sisi Sawane, a journalist and also an activist advocating for the rights of women and children in Africa. This is the National Youth Dialogue. Since morning we had different sessions. We had different plenary sessions where we discuss issues affecting young people, affecting citizens in the country. But before I get much into the nitty-gritties of this program, I would like to introduce my speakers. As I mentioned, it's going to be a very interesting session where we have different speakers from different sectors. Join me in welcoming Ms. Nyimasata Kamara. She's a lecturer at the University of the Gambia. Nyimasata is one of my panelists for this session. We also have Mr. Usman Yabo from the Association of Non-Governmental Organization, Tango. We also have an uncle. He's an uncle, a father to a lot of young people, a mentor, a role model, Mr. Mustafa Njai of Tough Africa Foundation. I also want to welcome Mr. Keba Silla from Stalin Consortium. Mr. Silla, you're welcome. Our partners in development, I call them the Gambia Police Force, because they are part of us in security, they are part of us, and they're the friends of the media. Can we please have Mrs. Aminata Sise from the Gambia Police Force? Can we have Mrs. Mariama Singate from the TRRC? I call her one of the youngest counsel at the TRRC, bold and smart. Come and join us on the podium as well. And last but not the least, Mrs. Aissata Day from the UNDP. Thank you very much. They'll be my panelists for this session. It's going to be 2 hours, 30 minutes, according to the program guide. And I guess we're going to, abide to the time that we have already got in the timeline. I just want to quote from the executive director in one of the town hall meetings, which he said the National Youth Dialogue is an initiative to create a platform for stakeholders, especially on the different reforms mechanism established by the government of the Gambia to directly involve young people. And here we are in Lower River region, in Jara Soma, where we have young people from different backgrounds, young people, the subject matter specialists that will be discussing with us issues affecting young people, issues affecting citizens, especially on the 4 reforms, which we discussed earlier this morning. So I would love to invite the 4th speaker, but before that, we have spotlight speakers from different ministries. We have Alaji Fadera. I think he's usual contributor of the Gambia Today, Gambia This Morning in different radio programs in the Gambia. We have been hearing his contribution about the NDP. And we know there are a lot of issues when you talk about the National Development Plan, which is the financing issue. We have, had a lot of pledges recently. So I think Mr. Alaji Fadera will come and discuss with us. He's the Director of Planning at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for Finance, and Economic Affairs. So he will come and join us and tell us about the National Development Plan, some of the challenges, the recommendation, and especially the financing problem, which I believe a lot of young people would love to listen to. So can I bring the mic to you?
Okay. Do I have to? Okay. Are we good to go? Oh, no problem. You can. Good afternoon. The Chairman, National Youth Council, the moderator, the United Nations Development Program resident representative, Chairman, Executive Director Tango, that's the Association of Non-Governmental Organizations, Mr. Mustafa Njai, TAF, Africa Global, other colleagues on the panel here, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure for us to be a part of this youth forum, because we all know that the youth are the most important segment of society. And if anything, the priorities, the development objectives of this country are geared towards enhancing the participation of the youth in the development process, and to also ensure that they benefit from those development interventions. We'll make this as informal as possible. We know that the government of the Gambia has crafted a national development plan 2018 to 2021 in a very participatory manner, where consultations were held across the length and breadth of this country to at least assess what people think are the development challenges, what they think the priorities are. A common country assessment that was done in collaboration with the United Nations country team in country was really a critical input into the National Development Plan. In February 2018, the President launched this National Development Plan, and subsequently, in May 2018, it was tabled at an international conference for the Gambia in Brussels, which helped to mobilize $1.7 billion in pledges. And I think as we go through this informal interaction, we'll try as much as possible to distinguish between what a pledge is, what a commitment is, and what a disbursement is. As our cousins from the other side of the river, I won't mention names, thought that when these pledges were made in Brussels, myself and my elder brother, Mr. Yabo, were there. But we had the feeling when we were in Brussels that as we were arriving, some of those people from the other side of the river were waiting for the delegation at the airport, thinking that we are coming with sack full of money. That's just by the way. The National Development Plan hinges on 8 strategic priority areas and 7 critical enablers. I won't go through this long list, because we have tried and we will continue to try to make sure that this documentation is available to the general population. Because after the launching, we have toured the length and breadth of this country, not at district level this time around, but at the regional level, to try and sensitize. And I think we also had interaction with different stakeholders to try and sensitize. And the document is in the public domain in the sense that hard copies are available, but most importantly, soft copies are available even online. So if you Google the National Development Plan, the Gambia should be able to what? You should be able to find it. And I think I've come with a few flash drives. I will load one and maybe give the rest to the Executive Director of the National Youth Council to load the rest and maybe share it among key stakeholders. Key among these priorities is to ensure that we reap the demographic dividend through an empowered youth. Not only is it a strategic priority area, but the intention is for all the strategic priority area and critical enablers, they should be used as an instrument, a vehicle, where the youth will be able to adequately participate in the development process, but also benefit from the development process. So when we talk about restoring good governance, respect for human rights, the rule of law, and empowering the citizens, the youth are very critical in this. So that's why all these reforms that we'll be talking about here, like the overarching agenda, is the National Development Plan that drives all this process. So if we talk about the TRRC, if we talk about the Constitutional Review Commission, etc., all these are an integral, important priority and activity in the National Development Plan. What I would want to focus on briefly, and maybe hopefully by end of next week or a little bit later, this should again be in the public domain, is that government and stakeholders have taken stock of the implementation of the National Development Plan for 2018. Because the National Development Plan makes provision for this, that at the end of every year, we should what? We should pause and take stock to assess what progress has been registered, what challenges we have encountered, and what kind of mechanisms are we going to put in place so that we'll be able to learn from the previous year's implementation. So that annual progress report has been validated by a cross-section of stakeholders, including government or development partners, non-state actors, that's the private sector, and CSOs. But even before that, there were a series of consultations. And the report found out that as at 31st December 2018, and again, this should be put into context, because we are assessing implementation for the year 2018. Maybe over time, from January 1st to now, a lot of other developments have taken place, maybe other challenges have been encountered, but these are not the subject of the annual progress report for 2018. They will be the subject of a midterm evaluation, which we will be undertaking in 2020. So in terms of summary, we have about 62 outcome indicators of the National Development Plan. And the assessment found out that only 3% of these 62 outcomes showed little or no progress at all. 40% from the assessment were found to be on track. 57% have registered some progress, but there were constraints. And again, we have to understand that government use an independent consultant, because most of the time people will ask, but why is it that government will have to use a consultant to assess this? It's also important that in as much as we do the plan, when we are assessing, there is some kind of independence to it. So that at the end of the day, people will not just see government trying to be judge and jury, where it does its own development plan, and it comes and assesses itself and taps itself on the back and say we have made significant progress. So there was that kind of independence to this through an independent consultant who worked with all stakeholders, and we as a government just helped to coordinate. So in terms of just trying to go into details so that I will not be out of time, of the 8 strategic priority areas, tourism registered significant progress. It means it's been found out to be 100% on track. And again, some people will ask, but how is that possible? We have to understand that for each of these priority areas, the 62 outcomes attached to all of them, there were set indicators. So the progress is based on assessing those indicators vis-a-vis what the baseline was, what the expected targets are. And it will not be what? It will not be fair midway where we change the entire direction of the National Development Plan and we don't focus on what? On the indicators in assessing progress, rather we look at other things. So this is the basis. When we say this has made progress, we're looking at what? The indicators, the baseline vis-a-vis the targets. So when we look at tourism, we're talking about tourism arrivals, tourism's contribution to GDP, etc. In terms of governance, the governance priority area is found to be 70% on track. For the first year, this is not bad. And if we look at it, like we've seen significant what? Improvements in the area of governance. We've seen a lot of the commissions that have been envisaged already established. Some have done a lot of work. Others have already wrapped their work. I think one of the commissions, the report is being what? Presented to the public today. So this is the metrics of what measurement as far as assessment of progress is concerned. In terms of the private sector priority area, felt based on the indicators that are 60% on track. Infrastructure and energy, about 60% on track. The two other strategic priority areas that made average progress is human capital. And when we talk about human capital here, talking about mainly health, education, water, and sanitation. And again, one of the major constraints in this area was the availability of data, especially for health, some of the health indicators, because some of them come through major surveys, and some of those surveys have not been undertaken in 2018. In terms of the macroeconomic area, we've what? We've made some progress, but not as much as we would want, at about 25% on track. The others that have made what, that were really challenged was agriculture and fisheries, as well as youth empowerment. I would maybe want to use a minute or two to maybe dilate on some of the indicators in the strategic priority relating to the youth. And again, in terms of the formulation process, some of you know this better than I do. This was not just crafted by one government institution, rather it was the stakeholders themselves. I could remember the series of meetings that we had with the youth constituency, through the National Youth Council, through the Ministry of Youth, but also through other stakeholders as to what the priorities are, and agreeing on the indicators that will be the metrics of success or progress. In terms of the institutional arrangements, the report found out that some of the institutional arrangements that were envisaged were not fully functional. So if anything, one of the recommendations is to make sure that government, together with other stakeholders, try as much as possible to enhance this institutional arrangement so that we will be able to enhance implementation. The resources. In terms of the resources, when we went to the international conference, but 43 countries participated, that's bilateral, 10 international organizations, so that means a total of what? 53 development partners participated. The total amount, like I said previously, that was pledged is 1.7 billion. And of this, about 40% are grants, about 60% are in the form of loans, but again, concessional loans, because we have terms, given the debt situation and given our international commitments, that certain proportion of what? Of our loans must constitute what? Must be of grant element. So you would want to ask, since the international conference, how much has been committed? When we say pledges, pledges are just like promises. You come to me and you say, this is the program that I have, or this is what I want to do, and I promise you, okay, if you want to do your house, I promise to give you what? Maybe so many sheets of corrugated iron. So it's a promise. It's when you come and I say, okay, we have some kind of agreement that's enforceable, then it becomes what? A kind of commitment. If I don't do it, given what? Given the conditions of the agreement, then you can hold me what? Hold me accountable. So in terms of commitment, in 2018, about $972 million were what? Were committed. This represents about 59.6% of the total amount that was pledged. Given our prior experience, this is not the first time Gambia has been doing what? A development plan or a poverty reduction strategy paper, but given our prior experience and experience across comparable countries, this is what? This is something that is what? That's really significant. In the first year of implementation, to have commitment of over 50% of the resources that were pledged. If we look at it in terms of the pledged resources too, because the committed resources could be committed, but they may not be tied to any sector. Of this, about 490 million were committed to different sectors by end December 2018. You would want to say how much has what? How much has come in? That is disbursement. In terms of disbursement, when we did the assessments, from the data that we have been able to gather, both from bilateral, multilateral, and from the UN system, during the year under review, that's 2018, about 182 million were disbursed. Disbursed means funds that have really been what? Really been utilized for implementation of projects. So that represents about what? About 10%. And again, we have to know that sometimes mobilizing some of these major projects, they start what? The initial phases are what? Kind of difficult to start, but once some of them start, then the disbursement rates can what? Can pick up very, very quickly. For example, when you look at road infrastructure, before you, like the feasibility studies, the initial designs, the initial mobilization, takes some time. But once that is done and they start actual construction, then the disbursement rates could pick up significantly. So that is the status as far as what? As far as the resources committed are concerned. And quickly, just to, I have 3 minutes, so I will try. And if we look at the empowering the youth, that's the demographic dividend, we have 4 outcome areas. That's harmonized rights-based approaches and improved coordination of programs and interventions related to youth, but as well as to sports. Gainful employment opportunities created, physical, mental, as well as social well-being and sexual and reproductive health and rights improved for young people, and sports promoted and competencies developed for effective participation in national development. So if we look at this, like in terms of the policy area, availability of what? One of the indicators was the availability of a revised National Youth Policy and Act. The baseline was there was none, as at end 2018, the assessment found out that there was a revised National Youth Policy and Act. Then we look at the existence of other regulatory standards for youth organizations and facilities. When it comes to increased employment, we're talking about the existence of what? A youth development fund. On this one, the baseline was what? Was no, as at end 2018, we've not been able to establish, but what we have is like a mini grant scheme and a mini loan scheme for youth was established. This is kind of being managed by what? By NACO. Number of youth-friendly centers, the baseline was 3, target was 7. As at end 2018, we had 6. So in the interest of time, we want to make this we want to keep it short, and when the floor opens, if there are questions, if there are comments, we would really want to take them, and we would really want to also learn from them, because this is a learning forum for all of us, so that we improve the implementation and the results orientation of the National Development Plan. Madam Moderator, thank you.